The ship appeared on a Tuesday. Not slowly, not with warning. One moment the sky above Earth was the same tired blue it had always been, and then there was something in it that had no business being there. A structure the size of a city, hanging in orbit like it had always been there and was only now allowing itself to be seen. Every radar station on the planet lit up at once. Every military channel went to red. Every government on Earth spent approximately 4 minutes in full panic before the signal came through, calm, clear, in perfect English, perfect Mandarin, perfect Arabic, and 41 other languages simultaneously. "We come to offer elevation," the signal said. "We mean no harm. We have been waiting for you to be ready." Captain Lena Croft heard the broadcast from a patrol vessel somewhere in the North Atlantic, eating a granola bar that tasted like cardboard and regret. She listened to it twice. She set the granola bar down. "Well," she said to no one in particular, "isn't that something?" She was on a transport to Geneva within the hour. Somebody in Washington had decided she was the right person for this, for reasons that were not fully explained to her. She was given a briefing packet, a change of clothes, and 48 hours to prepare for first contact with an alien civilization that had been watching Earth for 60 years. She packed a thermos of coffee, the good stuff. She had a feeling she was going to need it. Dr. Owen Sharp was already in Geneva when she arrived. He was sitting in a hallway outside the main briefing room, long legs stretched out in front of him. Staring at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had been right about something for 11 years and was carefully not saying so. His office back in Baltimore still smelled like printer toner. He had spent over a decade in that office decoding signal patterns that most of his colleagues called noise. They were not calling them noise anymore. He looked up when Lena walked in, looked her over once and said, "They've been broadcasting in rotational cipher for 63 years. The signal we picked up in 1961 wasn't a mistake. It was them, watching to see if we'd notice." "Did we?" "I did," he said. "Nobody listened." She studied him for a moment. "They're listening now." "Yes," he said. "Funny how that works." The Valthari delegation came down the next morning. Not in a shuttle. They simply appeared in the main hall of the UN building, a quiet shimmer in the air that became 3 figures standing in the center of the room. They were tall, not enormous, just tall, the way very old trees are tall, like they had grown into their height over a long time and were comfortable in it. Their skin held a faint glow that had nothing to do with the lighting. Their eyes were gold and entirely still. The one in the center spoke first. Its voice was layered, like 2 people speaking in almost perfect unison. "We are the Valthari," it said. "You are the 214th species we have invited into the Galactic Compact. This is an honor. You have earned it." The room was very quiet. Lena, sitting 3 rows back with her coffee and her notepad, wrote down 214th. That she underlined it. Owen, beside her, was already counting something on his fingers. The Valthari called their document the Compact. 9,000 years old. 213 signatures from civilizations across the galaxy, each one elevated, guided, brought into the fold of galactic civilization under Valthari guidance. They presented it on a surface that was not quite a screen and not quite paper, something in between that felt, when Lena reached out and touched it, faintly warm. She read it in 12 minutes. It was long. It was also, under all the ceremonial language and the ancient phrasing, a set of rules. A very detailed, very specific set of rules about what member species could build, where they could travel, what weapons they could develop, who they could talk to, and how disputes would be resolved. And every resolution process went through the Valthari, every single one. She set it down on the table. She looked at the lead delegate, the one they called Sorvev, 900 years old, patient in a way that had nothing to do with kindness and everything to do with certainty. "What happened to the ones who didn't sign?" she asked. The room went very still. The human diplomats on either side of her shifted in their seats. Sorvev looked at her the way adults look at a child who has asked a question that is technically smart but socially inconvenient. He smiled. It was a perfect smile, practiced over centuries. All species who were ready chose elevation, he said. That was not an answer. She knew it. He knew she knew it. He smiled anyway. That night, Owen didn't sleep. He sat in his hotel room with every database he had access to, and a few he probably wasn't supposed to have access to, and looked for the civilizations that hadn't signed. Not the official Valthari records. Those were clean, curated, the kind of history that has been very carefully organized. He dug into older sources, signal patterns, stellar cartography records, archaeological data from deep space probes. He found three civilizations that had received the compact and, according to every record he could find, simply stopped existing afterward. No war, no disaster, no final signal. They were there, and then they weren't, and the Valthari's historical record didn't include them at all. Not as failures, not as cautionary tales, not even as footnotes. Just gone. He sat with that for a long time. In the morning, he went to Lena's room and knocked on the door. She opened it already dressed, already holding her coffee. She looked at his face and stepped aside to let him in without asking. He told her what he'd found. She listened to all of it. She asked 2 questions. He answered them. Then she walked to the window and stood there looking out at the Geneva skyline for a long moment, and he watched her and said nothing, because he was fluent in 41 languages, and he knew what her expression meant in every single one of them. It meant, we are going to be very, very careful. They went back to the meeting hall. Lena sat down across from Sorveth. She picked up the compact. She read it one more time, slowly, every clause, every condition. Then she signed it. Sorveth watched her do it. His gold eyes were warm and satisfied in the way that old, certain things go warm when the world confirms what they already knew. Welcome, he said, to the Galactic Compact. Humanity has taken its place among the stars. Lena capped her pen. Thank you, she said. Owen, sitting behind her, did not look at the Valthari. He was looking at Lena's hands, steady, completely steady. The pen set down without a sound. He had worked with enough people in his life to know that steadiness like that wasn't calm. It was the beginning of something. He picked up his notepad and wrote one word at the top of a fresh page. Not a word in any of the 41 languages he spoke. A word in a language only humans had. The kind that comes from surviving things you weren't supposed to survive. He wrote, patience. Then he underlined it, the same way she had underlined 214th. Outside, the Valthari ship hung in orbit, enormous and still and old, casting no shadow because it had learned over 9,000 years not to. Below it, Earth went about its day. It did not know yet what it had signed. It would. The first year felt like a gift. Trade routes opened across the galaxy. Technologies that would have taken Earth centuries to develop arrived in data packets, offered freely, warmly, with Sorveth's steady smile attached to every transfer. Medical tools that could repair a damaged heart in minutes. Energy systems that made oil refineries look like campfires. Navigation technology that turned a 6-month deep space journey into a 3-week one. Earth celebrated. There were parades. There were speeches about the dawn of a new age. And there were magazine covers and documentaries and a lot of very sincere interviews with people who had tears in their eyes. Owen watched all of it from a chair that was slightly too small for him in a conference room that smelled like recycled air, reading the fine print. Every technology transfer came with a clause, not a hidden one. It was right there in the documentation, perfectly visible, the kind of thing that looks reasonable when you're happy and only starts to feel wrong when you read it slowly at 2 in the morning. The clause said, in different words depending on the document, the same essential thing. This technology is provided under compact licensing. Its modification or duplication without council approval is a violation of Article 7, and operational updates will be delivered through Valthari relay networks. Operational updates. He circled that phrase. He circled it a lot. The technology worked. It worked beautifully. It just needed to check in, regularly, with a Vialthari relay station to keep working. Like a phone that needs the company's servers to function. Like a car with a kill switch you didn't know was there until someone used it. He filed a report. It was received by the Compact Integration Office, stamped, logged, and put somewhere very organized where it would never be read. Commander Dante Reyes had a different kind of problem. His ship, the Ardent, was the first joint-species patrol vessel in the Compact. Half-human crew, half-Valthari auxiliaries, a symbol of the new relationship between Earth and the galactic community. The auxiliaries were good soldiers, disciplined, precise, technically excellent. They followed every order correctly and completely. They were also, Dante noticed about 6 weeks in, writing a lot of reports. Not to him, to someone else. He noticed it the way you notice something that's slightly off. A sound that isn't wrong exactly, just not quite right. An auxiliary named Verthos spent 20 minutes after every joint exercise in a back corridor, using a personal communication device that wasn't standard compact equipment. When Dante walked by, Verthos would stop, stand up straight, and say something polite. Always polite. The device would disappear. Dante filed a report. It was received. Nothing happened. He stopped filing reports about that particular thing. He started keeping his own notes instead. The Outer Rim was the first place things got loud. There was a human colony out there. It's a few thousand people on a cold planet called Howard's Rock, named after the geologist who found it. They had been out there for 11 years, completely self-sufficient, mostly left alone. 3 months after Earth signed the compact, the border raids started. Ships they couldn't identify. Supply depots hit overnight. 2 colonists missing after a raid on the eastern settlement. The colony submitted a formal petition to the Valthari Council for Defense Assistance. They got a response in 4 months. The response was a letter. The letter expressed deep concern. It recommended patience and dialogue. It used the word de-escalation 7 times. The colony stopped waiting. They had engineers and ex-military, and a lot of people who had been living on a hard planet long enough to know that nobody was coming to save them. And they set up their own defense perimeter. They built it from scratch, out of what they had. When the raids came again, they were ready. The raid didn't go well for the raiders. The Council's response to that was interesting. Not anger, exactly. More like discomfort, like someone who had been expecting a plant to stay where they put it and came back to find it had moved. Lena was the one who had to sit in the council chamber and answer for it. She sat very straight in a chair that was designed for a species with a different spine and listened to 6 council members express, in extremely formal language, how troubling it was that a compact member species had engaged in unilateral defensive action without council review. She counted how many times they used the word troubling. It was 8. The colony was attacked, she said. When they were done. Allegations of hostile activity are under investigation, Sorveth said. He was seated at the far end of the table, and he had the expression of someone who was not angry, just tired in the specific way that 900 years of dealing with new civilizations makes you tired. 3 raids in 6 weeks, she said. 2 missing people. The investigation will be thorough. How long will it take? These processes take the time they require. She smiled at him. It was the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. She had been practicing it. That evening, she sat with Owen in the ship's small common room and drank bad coffee, and didn't say anything for a long time. "You found something," she said eventually. It wasn't a question. Owen set his cup down. And he had been working with Valthari translation archives for access to the older compact documents. Centuries of records, meticulously kept. While working through them, he had found the Council's internal classification system, not by accident. He had been looking for it since the first week. He told her what it said. Humanity's designation, provisional, high volatility, reassessment pending, not chosen, not elevated, not a member species in good standing, probationary. Lena was quiet for a moment. Outside the small porthole, stars moved past at the slow, steady pace of a ship in transit. "The other 213, she said. "What are they classified as?" Owen had checked. Most of them were listed as stable, compliant, integrated. A few were listed as developing, which appeared to mean they were still in the process of learning to follow the rules correctly. None of them were provisional. None of them had been labeled high volatility, only humanity. "We're not what they thought we were," Owen said. "No," Lena said. "We're exactly what they thought we were. That's what worries them." She stood up and rinsed her cup in the small sink, movements precise and quiet. She turned off the light above the counter. In the doorway, she stopped. "Keep working on those archives," she said. "All of them, everything you can get." He nodded. "And Owen," she said, not turning around, "don't file the reports." He looked at the table where his notepads sat, full of circled phrases and careful notes that had been going nowhere for months. "Already stopped," he said. She left. The room was quiet, and the stars kept moving. Somewhere on the Ardent, Dante was running drills he hadn't been asked to run, against scenarios he hadn't been authorized to model, with a crew that had stopped asking why and started asking how. The Vialthari's reports classified all of it as pre-compliance anxiety, normal, expected. The 214th species going through its uncertainty before settling into the pattern. They had seen it 213 times before. They were certain they knew how it ended. The Dreth came in quietly. That was the thing about them. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't send a fleet or issue a formal challenge. They just started appearing in human trade corridors, ships that matched no compact registration, running dark, moving through human space like they owned it and were simply not yet bothering to say so. The Vialthari Council described them as a recently integrated, still-developing partner species, which in council language meant, "They are our problem, and you will be patient." Dante lost his first ship in the 4th week. It was a supply vessel, unarmed, running a routine line between 2 outer rim stations. It disappeared cleanly. No distress signal, no debris field, no record of contact. Just gone, the way a dropped coin disappears into still water. He filed a report. The council opened an inquiry. The inquiry was, by all indicators, going to take a long time. He lost 2 more ships in the weeks that followed. Each time he filed a report. Each time the council expressed concern and reminded him that unilateral military response would constitute a violation of Compact Article 19, which governed the use of force by member species without council authorization. After the 3rd ship, Dante stopped filing reports. He sat in his quarters for one evening and looked at the wall and did the kind of thinking that doesn't make noise. The slow, deep kind, where you take apart the situation and look at all its pieces and accept them for what they are instead of what you hoped they'd be. Then he stood up, walked to the ship's operations center, and started running drills. Not against the Dreth. He didn't have enough data on the Dreth to model them properly yet. He ran them against Vialthari response patterns. His crew noticed the change. None of them said anything. They ran the drills. Owen's translation error was the thing that changed Lena's face. He found it on a Thursday. In working through the original Vialthari text of the compact against his own translations, something he'd been doing for months, with the particular focus of a man who suspects he's been reading the wrong map. The word in Article 12, the one his team had been translating as restraint for the past 11 months, the word that had shaped every diplomatic posture humanity had taken in that time, it wasn't restraint. In Vialthari, the word meant something more like submission pending review, an act of yielding that the Vialthari expected to be permanent. For 11 months, Earth's diplomats had been walking into council meetings and promising in the most formal galactic language available that humanity was in the process of permanently yielding. He sat with this information for exactly 4 minutes, and then he opened 2 documents at the same time. The first was a correction memo. The second was something else entirely. He wrote both simultaneously, one hand, essentially, on each. He didn't sleep that night. Lena was called before the High Council 3 weeks later. The chamber was enormous, built for dozens of species, curved walls that seemed to breathe, acoustics designed to make every voice carry with equal weight regardless of the speaker's size. Lena stood in the center of it in her uniform and felt, not small exactly, but aware of the specific way the room had been designed to make a new species feel aware of how new they were. The charges, they didn't call them charges, they called them concerns requiring clarification, were about the outer rim. More colonies had started defending themselves, not just Howard's Rock, and 7 others all in the past 2 months, all responding to Dreth incursions with what the Council called escalatory force. The Council called it escalatory. The colonists called it staying alive. 6 Council members took turns expressing disappointment. Lena counted. The word disappointed appeared 8 times. The word concerning came up 11. She was nodding at the appropriate moments and writing numbers on her notepad. Sorveth spoke last. He told her that the Vilthari had chosen humanity because of their adaptability, their capacity to grow. This period of difficulty was a crucible, he said, necessary, valuable. The compact had guided 213 species through exactly this kind of trial. She let him finish. Then she stood still for a moment, which she did sometimes when she was deciding exactly how many words to use. "You built the crucible," she said. Sorveth's expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted. "Difficult transitions. The Dreth are in our corridors," she said. "Our ships are gone. Your investigation has been open for 6 weeks and has produced no findings. Our colonies are defending themselves because there is no one else to defend them." She paused. "We are doing exactly what the compact told us to do. We are showing restraint." She said the word correctly this time. Owen's corrected pronunciation. The real word. The Vilthari one. Sorveth was very still for a moment. His gold eyes moved to her, then away. "Of course," he said after a beat. "The translation has been nuanced from the start." She nodded once. She left. When in the corridor outside, she walked for a long time without speaking. An aide tried to brief her on the next meeting and she waved him off without looking at him. She took a different route back to the transport bay, one that went past a long stretch of windows overlooking the station's docking arm. Dante's report was waiting when she boarded. He had sent it through a personal channel, flagged with a code they'd established months ago for things that weren't going into official files. The report was 3 lines. It said, "Retrieved from a derelict relay station near the Thenvar corridor. Vilthari internal assessment of humanity. Full document attached. Read alone." She read it alone. The document was long and carefully organized in the way that things written by a very old civilization are organized. Thorough, precise, and without any of the self-consciousness that comes from writing something you think someone might someday read. It was an internal document. It had never been meant for human eyes. It covered everything. Humanity's volatility score, their non-compliance rate, their trajectory, and at the end of it, a list of options, response strategies, ranked by efficiency, with projected outcomes and timelines attached. Option 1, extended compliance conditioning. Time required, 18 months. Success probability, 62%. Option 2, economic isolation. Time required, 30 months. Success probability, 41%. Option 3, proxy destabilization. Already in progress. That was the Dreth. That was what the raids were. Option 4, erasure and record correction. Projected execution date, 14 months from the document's filing date. The filing date was 2 months ago. Lena set the document down on the small table in her cabin. She looked at it for a while. The ship hummed around her, steady and familiar, the sound of recycled air and working systems that she had lived inside for so long it had become the sound of thinking. She picked up her coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway. Then she opened a channel to Owen. He picked up immediately, which meant he had been awake, which meant he already knew something was coming. She didn't explain the document. She didn't need to. She said, "How many load-bearing walls does the compact have?" There was a pause. "I've been counting," he said. 7, maybe 8. "Find all of them." She closed the channel. She sat in the dark for a moment longer. The stars outside her porthole were the same stars they had always been, but they looked different now. Not hostile, not frightening. Just real, solid, something to navigate by. 12 months. She had 12 months. A mistranslated treaty. A tactical officer who had quietly stopped asking permission. A linguist who had been right about everything for over a decade. And a species that had survived 10,000 years of its own worst instincts. That was, she thought, more than enough. She got up. She turned on the light. She started working. Humanity did not panic. That was the thing the Vialthari's models hadn't accounted for. The models were good, thorough, built from 9,000 years of watching species receive bad news and respond in predictable ways. Some collapsed inward, and some reached outward with desperate aggression. Some simply froze until the decision was made for them. The Vialthari had categorized every variation. They had a response protocol for each one. They had no category for what humanity did, which was go quiet, go to work, and stop talking about it where anyone could hear. Lena didn't broadcast the document. She didn't go to the press. She didn't deliver a speech about betrayal or destiny or the fire of human survival. She went back to her desk, opened her calendar, and started setting meetings, not urgent, not flagged, just the normal rhythms of a compact liaison officer doing her job. She was very busy for the next 12 months. Owen spent 3 weeks dismantling the compact clause by clause, not looking for loopholes. He was too careful for that. Loopholes get closed. And he was looking for the places where the document assumed cooperation because cooperation had always been given. Places where the compact's structure only held up if the member species believed in it completely. He found 7 of them. The most important one was in Article 31, the Communication Clause. The compact restricted member species from forming independent alliances or communicating with non-approved species outside of Council-monitored channels. But the restriction only applied to formal diplomatic communication. It said nothing about data. It said nothing about broadcasting documented evidence to every species in the compact simultaneously, because no species had ever tried that before. He wrote that one down on a separate sheet and underlined it twice. Dante ran drills, every day, sometimes twice. His crew had long since stopped asking for explanations. They had the easy, efficient rhythm of people who have practiced something enough times that their bodies know the steps before their minds do. He had cross-trained his human crew on 6 different response formations. He had quietly learned from hours of observation and some careful conversations with the more talkative of his Vialthari auxiliaries the standard Vialthari fleet response timeline. How long it took them to mobilize, where they started, what they prioritized. The auxiliaries reported his drills to their supervisors, who categorized them as standard training enhancement. They were not wrong. That was exactly what they were. It was also something else. On Earth, that things moved in the particular way that human bureaucracy moves when it has been told to move quietly, which is to say, very slowly on the surface and at tremendous speed underneath. 18 nations had been quietly coordinating for 3 months. Not military coordination, not officially. The meetings were logged as infrastructure summits, climate working groups, economic adjustment sessions, all completely legitimate. All fully documented. Every clause of the compact checked and rechecked by Owen's translation team before anyone in the room said anything that might register as a violation. The Vialthari monitored the meetings. They always monitored everything. Their analysts filed reports noting elevated human coordination activity across multiple governments. And the reports were classified as pre-compliance consolidation, a normal phase seen in many species, where the new member world pulled together in the face of social disruption before settling into compact rhythms. They were, the reports concluded, right on schedule. Sorveth sent Lena a personal message in the 7th month. It was warm and formal in the way that 9 centuries of practice makes things warm and formal. He said he was pleased with humanity's continued development. He said the early turbulence of integration was behind them. He said he looked forward to a long and fruitful relationship. She wrote back the same day. Thank you. We are just getting started. He read it as optimism. She meant every word of it literally. The colonies at the outer rim had, without anyone asking them to, have begun doing their own version of what was happening everywhere else. Howard's Rock shared its defense design with 4 neighboring colonies. Those colonies adapted it, improved it, shared it further. The tech was simple, built from available materials, completely independent of any Velthari licensed system. It didn't need to check in with a relay station. It didn't have an operational update clause. It just worked. The Council flagged it as a compact Article 7 concern, unlicensed technology development. They sent a formal notice. The colonies sent a formal acknowledgement. Then they kept building. Owen found the 8th load-bearing wall in the 9th month. It was in the preamble, the part nobody reads carefully because it is the part written to sound important rather than to say anything specific. And the preamble described the compact as a voluntary covenant of mutual elevation, entered freely by each species. The word freely was in the original Vilthari text. Owen read it 16 times. The document the Vilthari had shown humanity, the one with 213 signatures, they had never shown Earth what the refusal looked like, what the process was for declining, not because the option didn't exist, because the document assumed no one would ever look for it. He found it buried in Annex 9, in a subsection about procedural rights of petitioning species. A species could, under the terms of the compact itself, formally challenge the terms of their integration on the grounds of misrepresentation. It had never been used. It required submitting documented evidence of Velthari misrepresentation to all compact member species simultaneously. He read that twice. Documented evidence to all compact member species simultaneously. He picked up the comm and called Lena. She picked up on the second ring. I found it, he said. A pause. When can you have it ready? Draft in 4 days, final version in 2 weeks. Another pause, shorter. 2 weeks. He was already writing. The final piece was Dante's. With 1 month left before the Velthari's projected date, Dante redistributed his crew. Quietly. The Velthari auxiliaries were reassigned to non-sensitive posts in ways that were fully within his command authority and completely normal on paper. His human crew took over the positions that mattered. He ran one last drill. The full sequence. Start to finish without pausing. 12 minutes. 40 seconds. He stood at the center of it and watched his people move through the steps they had practiced until those steps were the most natural thing they knew how to do. And he thought about the 3 ships he had lost, and the report that had gone nowhere, and the long months of being very patient in ways that had cost him sleep. He was never going to get back. Then he went and got coffee and waited. The broadcast went out on a Monday. Not from a military vessel, not from a government channel, from Owen's workstation, through a deep space relay array that humanity had built independently over the past year, in a format that reached every compact member species simultaneously in their own language. The broadcast contained the full contents of the Velthari internal assessment document, every classification, every option, every projected date, and with it, in 41 languages, a single question. It didn't accuse, it didn't demand. It just asked, did they do this to you too? And then it waited. The first response came in 40 minutes, from a species called the Surath, who had been in the compact for 300 years. Their message was 12 words in their own language, which Owen translated in real time, his hands very still on the keyboard. We have been waiting for someone to ask. Then another response. Then 6 more before the hour was done. Then, over the next 2 days, responses from species that had been holding their own documents, their own classifications, their own projected dates, alone with them, and for decades or centuries, certain they were the only ones. They were not the only ones. They had never been the only ones. Lena read the responses as they came in, standing at her workstation with cold coffee at her elbow, and did not say anything for a long time. Owen sat at the next station, translating as fast as the messages arrived, which was very fast and getting faster. Dante was already running the final set of drills. Outside, the Vialthari's ship hung in orbit, enormous and old, and suddenly, for the first time in 9,000 years, uncertain about something it could not yet name. The Vialthari fleet came in from the dark. Not one ship, not the diplomatic vessel that had hung in Earth's orbit like a patient suggestion. This was a fleet, dozens of vessels, ancient and immense, moving with the slow, absolute confidence of things that had never needed to hurry because nothing had ever required it. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a formation that had not changed in 9,000 years, because for 9,000 years there had been no reason to change it. It was, by any measure, overwhelming. Lena's ship, the Ardent, was first in the human defensive line. Behind it, 7 other vessels, smaller, newer, built without Vialthari licensing and therefore without the kill switch buried in the operational update system. Beside them, forming up slowly, came ships from 4 other compact species, then 3 more, then another 8, arriving from jump points across the sector, moving into positions that had been planned in private messages over the past weeks. Not an army? Not yet. But not nothing either. Dante stood at tactical and looked at the Vialthari fleet on the display and said very quietly, "There it is." His hands were easy at his sides. His crew was at their stations, doing what they had practiced until doing it felt like breathing. Owen should not have been on the bridge. There was no operational reason for a xenolinguist to be standing at a secondary station in the middle of a potential military engagement. And he had mentioned this, clearly and more than once, on the way up. Lena had listened to him and then said, "Can anyone else translate 6 species in real time if we need coordinated communication?" He had said no. She had said, "Bridge." He was on the bridge. He was deeply unhappy about this and also exactly where he needed to be. And the Vialthari broadcast came through on every channel simultaneously. The same signal in every compact language, layered and formal, and carrying under it the particular tone of something that had never had to raise its voice because the whole galaxy had always gone quiet when it spoke. The message said, the species known as humanity had violated the compact, had destabilized the galactic order, had engaged in unauthorized data distribution, independent military development, and the incitement of interspecies distrust. Humanity would stand down, disarm, and submit to full council reevaluation, or face the consequences outlined in Compact Enforcement Protocol. The Compact Enforcement Protocol, Owen knew, was Article 44, the same article that had made 3 civilizations disappear without a record. Lena waited until the broadcast finished. Then she keyed the comm. The channel opened to the full Vialthari fleet, to every compact species present, to every ship in the sector that was listening. She said, "We're going to need a minute. Not a challenge, not a declaration. Just that, a minute." The Vialthari waited. Because in 9,000 years, a species asking for a minute before responding to an enforcement broadcast had always, without exception, meant that the capitulation speech was being prepared. Species asked for minutes to compose themselves before yielding. It was a recognized stage of the process. What came instead was the coordinated response. Owen worked the communications board, translating in real time between 7 different species, filling in the gaps in the 3 he had only partially decoded with the particular improvisational confidence of a man who had been wrong twice in 41 languages and right about everything that actually mattered. He talked to ships he had never spoken to. He translated commanders he had never met. He was doing 3 things at once, and he was not good at this under pressure, and he did it anyway. 47 species broke from Vialthari alignment. Not all of them. The Compact had 214 members now, and many of them had been integrated for so long that the Compact's shape had become the shape of their world. They didn't know how to want anything outside of it. But 47 did. Some because they had responded to the broadcast with their own buried documents. and some because they had watched humanity refuse to fit the pattern and found something in that refusal that matched a very old, very quiet ache they had been carrying. Some because they had run the numbers on what happened to species that Option 4 got applied to and decided that if it could happen to humanity, it could happen to them next. They weren't wrong. 47 species, in a formation that had taken 3 weeks of encrypted messages and one very long, very careful strategy session in Owen's notes to design, moved into a defensive arrangement that the Vialthari's tactical models had never seen before. Because the Vialthari's models were built on the assumption that compact species did not cooperate laterally. They cooperated vertically, up toward the Vialthari, never sideways toward each other. This was sideways. And this was all sideways. The battle was not clean. Lena hadn't expected clean. She had expected complicated, and she'd planned for complicated, and she had spent months talking to Dante about the difference between a fight you win and a fight you survive long enough to change the terms of. The Vialthari fleet was larger, older, better armed. They had fought wars across centuries. They had never lost an enforcement action. But they had also never fought against a species that had spent 14 months reverse engineering their own response patterns. They had never fought beside species that were, for the first time, talking to each other instead of reporting to a single authority. And they had never had their weapons systems get halfway through an engagement and then start requiring operational updates that the ships they were targeting had built countermeasures for, because a linguist in Baltimore had read the fine print 11 months ago and flagged it to an engineer who had spent 6 months building a patch. The patch worked on roughly 70% of the Vialthari's licensed systems. 70% was enough. The fight lasted 4 hours, not a victory. Not the kind you write on monuments. The Vialthari pulled back, regrouped, reassessed. They were not broken. They were, for the first time in 9,000 years, unsure, and unsure was a thing they did not know how to be efficiently. It slowed them. It created gaps. Into those gaps, Lena moved. Not to attack, to negotiate. Then she sent a message to Sorveth directly on his personal channel, using the formal address reserved for equals in Vialthari diplomatic tradition, a form of address that no non-Vialthari species had ever used because no one had ever looked it up. Owen had looked it up. The message said, "We are prepared to discuss new terms." Sorveth did not respond for 2 days. When he did, it was brief. 1 line. It requested a meeting. In person. No aides. She said yes. They met in a small room on a neutral station 3 weeks later. The room smelled like ship metal and recycled air and the bad coffee she had brought in a thermos because she was not meeting anyone anywhere without coffee. That was simply not a thing she was willing to do. Sorveth sat across from her, and he was 900 years old, and for the first time in any conversation she'd had with him, he looked like it. The certainty was still there. It was structural, it was 9 millennia deep, it didn't leave overnight. But something around the edges of it was different. Like a very large, very old wall that had developed a hairline crack, and was still a wall, but would never quite not have that crack. He asked her how humanity had done it. She thought about 12 months of quiet work. Owen circling phrases at 2 in the morning. Dante running drills nobody asked him to run. Colonies on cold, outer rim planets building defense systems out of nothing because no one else was going to do it. 18 governments agreeing on something for the first time in living memory. The 47 species responding to a broadcast in the middle of the night with messages that all said the same thing in different languages. We thought we were alone. "You kept telling us we were chosen," she said. "We just disagreed about what for." Sorveth looked at her for a long moment. The gold eyes were still. The room was very quiet. He had no answer for that. She poured him a cup of the bad coffee. He looked at it. He picked it up and drank it slowly, and she watched him do it, and neither of them said anything for a while. Outside the station's windows, the stars held their places. They had been there before the Vialthari. They would be there after this, whatever this became. A galaxy that had run the same story for 9,000 years had, without much noise or ceremony, started telling a different one. Not because humanity was stronger, Not because humanity was smarter or braver or more deserving of the stars than anything else that lived under them. Because when given 12 months and a problem, and the choice between yielding and not, humanity had looked at the options and quietly, methodically, refused to pick either one. They had made a third option instead. They had made it everyone's problem. And then they had offered bad coffee. Which was, Owen would later write in a document that eventually became part of the renegotiated compact's historical record, a more revolutionary act than anyone gave it credit for at the time.